welcome to a new episode of Media Twits. I'm Mark Glazer, Executive Editor of PBS Media Shift. Today we'll be talking about living a slow life in the big city. Is it possible to find work-life balance when we're in an always-on, always-mediated mode of life? So we'll be talking to the author of New Slow City, and we'll be discussing unplugging from technology and finding work balance. First, we want to a word from our sponsor for the podcast. Running your own business requires focus, and so does parenting. Media Twits podcast sponsor NextSpace created a place where parents could give their best quality of attention to both co-working space and childcare space under one roof. Learn more at nextspace.us/nextkids. And indeed, I am in the NextSpace co-working space right now, and my one-year-old son Everett is next door at NextKids. So it's a great setup having your kid nearby while working. Another way to get some sort of work-life balance is happening right here at NextSpace. So we're going to be talking about just this idea that we're all kind of struggling with being media people, being on technology, being connected. It's wonderful. We know all the positive things, but what are some of the negative aspects, and how can we kind of find that balance? First, I want to introduce our panel. We have Andrew Lee joining us from American University. We have Donna Ballard joining us from University of Texas. Geir Berthelsen joining us from the World Institute of Slowness. And Jefferson Yen, our Media Twits producer in LA. And William Powers, author of New Slow City. And let's start with you, Bill. You wrote a book about you lived in a 12 by 12 home in kind of the rural North Carolina, and now with this new book you decided to live in one of these micro apartments, basically a 2 12 by 12s with your new wife. While she was working full-time, you were working the 2-day work week with 5-day weekends, which is sounds kind of sweet. But what was it like? I don't know if you still are there, but tell us, what was it like living in that kind of situation, trying to live this kind of slow life without a lot of technology in kind of the heart of Manhattan?
Off-grid cabin in North Carolina, and writing about it in my book 12 by 12, I returned to my native New York City, where I've been living for years, and found that our 2,000 square foot townhouse in Queens was just simply too big. So we downsized to a 340 square foot micro apartment in Greenwich Village. Lower rent means more free time, and it was basically 2 12 by 12s put together that we were living in. But we found ways to get really creative. The city became our larger home. We connected more with people, with the restaurants, cafes, theater, and so on, because we were less in the apartment itself. And we found that equipping it almost like a ship, like practicing minimalism, was an extremely great practice because we had less stuff to worry about and less clutter.
And what about how you use technology in that situation? Obviously, you're a freelance writer. Now you're at NYU, but during the time of this book, you were writing stories and doing kind of the work of a writer. What did you have any rules around using technology on and off during your kind of 5-day weekends?
Absolutely. So we would set very strict rules about how we use technology because oftentimes it would creep into their lives. As everyone knows, 75% of Americans have dinner under the table, and we decided we're not going to use it in the morning when you wake up or after 6 o'clock in the evening, and also definitely not on Sundays, no technology. And what this did was it kind of decluttered our lives and allowed for more creativity to flow because we weren't constantly dependent upon the urgency of the present moment and everyone else's needs. I mean, technology should be your tool, and you shouldn't be its fool. So it's a question of defining. Honestly, what we found during this experiment is that we were vastly more productive with our time because it released a lot of time to think about longer-term goals, medium-term goals, not just what's going on in the present.
And Donna, I know you wrote recently on Huffington Post about kind of work-life balance and how this is kind of, in a way, the problem is almost like a class issue, that there's such a large underclass of people in the U.S. that, you know, don't even have the chance to think about work-life balance because they're balancing 2 jobs and kids and trying to do everything else. So what's your take on this and how prevalent it is?
I think the whole notion of around this conversation of time really gets more to the heart of when we talk about work-life balance and the stresses of juggling multiple things and technology and its push and pull on us, that if you center it around time, you do include people of all socioeconomic levels, and then you start looking at equity in a broader sense. So both people like William, downshifting, I think is the term. Would you say, William, that would be? So both those kind of decisions, but also sort of broader institutional questions about you know, a living wage and time off as actually something that people from all socioeconomic groups need, including parents who are primary caregivers. So what we would call a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad, but which is just someone who's full-time caregiver.
Yeah, Bill, did you have a thought about that? I mean, I know in your book you talk a little bit about how, you know, how difficult it is for other people, and sometimes you felt almost guilty about the fact that you were taking so much time off.
Right. So during these 5-day weekends, people were actually sometimes quite jealous. You know, why is it that you get to spend these big equity questions that we're talking about? You know, the fact that we need universal health care, if we're going to practice what Juliet Schor calls, you know, self-provisioning, having multiple streams of income into our lives based on creativity and based on our passions, that we don't have to be cinched to a certain one employer. So that's one thing. And also, you know, more maternity leave, more vacation time. We only have 2 weeks a year on average, whereas Europeans have 9 weeks more a year than we do. All these are the big policy questions. But then on an individual, what it comes down to is thinking a lot about the old Greek word that Aristotle would refer to of eudaimonia. What's the best life? And it's a philosophical issue of the fact that, you know, I think of Camus' poem, which I love. It's called The Physics of Happiness. You know, time in the open air, love for another being, freedom from ambition, creation. So just those 4 things. And in other words, so technology in my life is subservient to that. I use it all the time, and I couldn't operate this type of a lifestyle without it. But I also, like all of us, fall into the danger of having it erode my freedom.
Yeah, well, thanks. We haven't had a lot of poetry readings on the show. I think we need more of those. Gear, I wanted to bring you into this discussion. You run what's known as the World Institute of Slowness. Tell us about that. You also do slow consulting. Is that for companies as well that you do that? And you sell slow coffee. So we definitely want to hear about your institute, your consulting, and also the coffee.
Yeah, we consult big industries because we have proven that, you know, slow balance with fast is more productive. It's going back to the reason why we founded the institute was really, you know, playing with time and putting the question. We always ask, you know, why slow? But the question should be why fast? And you want things to happen fast, so you have more time to do the things you like to do slowly. And I think that's the essence of life as well. And I think why it is so important at the moment is, as you wrote in something I read earlier today, that our culture values speed and connectivity. And I think that's right. But our humanity needs care, belonging, and love. And that you can only have in slowness.
And how do you bring that to a company, though? How do you consult? How do you bring this kind of slowness? Because companies, at least in the U.S., maybe it's different in Europe, but in the U.S., companies are all about fast and growth and doing more.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, if you think about the analogy between, you know, a process, if you have a good control of a process, you have found a balance between fast and slow. So in a way, if things go too fast, you don't understand it in slow motion. So then you have to go back and get it in process and line it in a way, and that's balance. So, you know, fast is good. But it's fast is good because then we can be more slow.
Right, and I think. Go ahead.
And I think, you know, in a way that balance in many countries is out of balance because technology has gone a little further than humanity. So in order, we have to bring back a bit of the humanity so we can really take advantage of technology. I mean, we have already done a lot, but I think that's what we work in a way. And I mean, if you go into a company, there is a lot of firefighting, and if you are able to slow people down and can move them from the act of not thinking in a way and getting not firefighting but proactive behavior, then you become more productive and you probably can have 7 days hours a day at work instead of 10.
Andrew, do you buy into all this about kind of slowing down and then it's gonna increase productivity by having more slowness and having people work less hours? Do you see that? Do you think there's a potential there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that the slowness, there is this inherent kind of craving for slowing down our lives, right? And I think we've talked about this on previous podcasts with Doug Rushkoff and other folks. Like, why do we have this affection for zombie apocalypse movies and The Walking Dead? Is that it's the ultimate in simplifying our lives. No more cell phones, no more technology. It just gets back down to
survivalist.
Human relationships. What's that?
Like survivalist.
Yeah, like survivalist, but you know, but Walking Dead is about relationships and and what are fundamentally human values in this world where you're stripped of all these communications technologies and ways to connect, and it's what's in front of you is all that you have. So I think there is this kind of interesting craving from the public on what would it be like to remove ourselves from that rat race that we have now of hyperconnectivity and things happening really fast. And I always see AMC, the channel, both in Mad Men and in The Walking Dead, as one of the few channels that just lets silence be the supporting actor, right? It's that things are kind of slower and more deliberate, and it's kind of a refreshing thing, but it's really unusual because almost no other programs do that, and it is actually, at least a channel that is willing to kind of take things at a slower pace. And now it's kind of weird talking about a TV show being part of what we consider unplugging, but I do think it's a slowing down of the pace of how we ingest things and how we experience things.
Well, slow entertainment, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So we've talked about before also there's the National Day of Unplugging in the U.S. where people take a day. It's going to be, I guess, next year, March 6th and 7th. And I'm curious about your people's habits when it comes to unplugging. Shauna, I know you've got this really nice watch to kind of remind you about staying in the present. Do you also have kind of an unplugging practice where you stay away from technology, like Bill was saying? I guess Sundays and in the mornings he's off of technology. Do you try to practice that too?
Yeah, I don't do unplugging. I've done it. I would say at night I don't, or I will do something like get work done for a whole day before I check email. So it's kind of, it's not in my view always about the technology as William said, or is it Bill? About what did he say? It should be a tool. Don't be its fool. So, yeah. So I think the whole centering around technology is helpful to get people to recognize some of this, but then you want to move away from that to some extent and realize that technology, as some of the other panelists have said, you can actually use. I think it might have been in our email correspondence. They talked about using it to go slow. Technology is not the evil here. It's about our intentionality, and the thing about all of it is always who's in power. So with the slow movement, what I tell my students is it's not about always going slow, and so I'm really happy to hear that same conversation here. That's not at all the idea, because that would be unattractive to a lot of people, but it's about who's in power. It's, are you deciding how fast you'll go in a very intentional way? Are you being uncompromising about the quality of what you're doing? And the other part of it is that it's also can be very intense. So this notion of the slow products, that it's Gear, talks about the soul and the heart of doing work. It's really intense, and so it's not this like easier life or more carefree. It's just more intentional, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And Gear, is there kind of the sense of unplugging where you are? I mean, is that something that you do on a regular basis, or do people just try to somehow put it in, get it into their lives? Do people try to take time like that?
Yeah, some do, but I mean, we have a big problem here in Europe as well, and it's being discussed also. Example is, for example, midwives here has said, they don't want people to take phone with them during giving birth, because it seems like we miss the moment, because we are more eager of getting the first picture on Facebook than having that experience. And I think that's also the real essence of learning technology, not letting it destroy the moment. But so I think, I mean, it's still in, technology we have to learn a lot from technology. So, but it's important, and I think it is so important, because if we don't do something or get something understanding about it, my example would be, for example, if things go faster, we have we can then see, what are we going to fill that time with? If we fill it with new things that go faster, then everything goes so fast that we are really in a computer game. So in a way, we have to balance it, and that's where we can really get the good effect of technology.
Right. If we're just using our leisure in order to do other things that are just moving just as fast, then where is the downtime? I mean, I guess that's the thing, is we have to figure out how to bring in downtime.
And that's what, on the slow coffee example, for example, that is showing what's behind the product. What is the time in that product, and that's how we are using these things to show the examples of. There's a difference of knowing the name of something and knowing something.
Can I give a non-technology example that I think is related to what you're talking about there?
Sure.
So Thomas Erickson talks about filling in all the gaps. He wrote a book on slowness and talks about filling in all the gaps and not always choosing the way that might that allows us to have some silence or downtime. And a simple thing that I like to do on the way home, there's two routes that are pretty roughly equivalent in terms of how quickly I can get home. But one involves just stopping and at a stoplight. And I timed it, and sometimes it's going to be slower, sometimes it's faster, mostly it's the same. And so I've decided I just always choose that. So I have just a minute of time to just sit, be at a stoplight, as opposed to having to figure out all of the tricks to get somewhere faster. I really enjoy, and it started when I had a daughter, in part from safety, because I thought, I don't want to try to merge onto that street. Let me just sit here and be for a minute before I get home. So
it's like finding your slowness at a stop sign, at a stoplight. Bill, I'm hoping you got through some technical problems and you're able to chat with us. What other kinds of things did you find when it comes to being in New York City and Manhattan in trying to kind of slow down in your work? How were you able to do that?
Well, there were several things, Mark, and I'm sorry I got cut off for a minute there, but I'm just in the great outdoors. One of the wonderful benefits of these technologies is that you can just step outside. It's something called urban sanctuaries is one tool that you can use. So even in the heart of Manhattan, we'd routinely go to the edge of Pier 45 or the Ramble in Central Park or any other space where you can connect with nature. Because as E.O. Wilson talks about in his biophilia hypothesis, unless we connect with nature, and a lot of the eco-psychologists today are picking up on this as a cause of depression and other mental disorders, is that we're just not connected with nature enough. We are inherently emotional social creatures that connect with our environments. If we do not have that, we are going to have mental issues. So if you're in a city, please, every day for at least an hour, connect with nature in some way through finding an urban sanctuary. The other thing is just to live at the third story. Now, this sounds kind of silly in a way to someone not in New York maybe, but, you know, those of us in New York or bigger cities, we're constantly barraged by sample sale come-ons and happy hours and everything at the street level. Just by, for a second, looking up and enjoying the gleam of light on a window above you, or the hawk above Washington Square Park, or, you know, the trees or the fast-moving clouds in the sky. All of these things are ways of what David Abram talks about in Spell of the Sensuous, of connecting with, you know, the larger-than-human matrix around us. So I don't think slow is really necessarily about, you know, rejection of technology or speed. It's about, again, finding the place of technology within the larger structures of what makes us happy.
Andrew, did you want to jump in about ways that are you able to kind of find that within your work and being in DC? Is it hard for you to kind of unplug and be away from technology and media?
It's easier now than before. I mean, having two kids helps in that dimension.
If they're not on media, if they're not on technology, they're one of the few benefits of twin 4-year-old boys is that it does kind of force you to get back to fundamentals. So it really is kind of technology free for Monday through Friday with these two boys. I'm not one of those techno Luddites. I mean, they are eating up the iPad when they do get on it, but we try to avoid it from Monday through Friday. And it's interesting that I kind of found myself doing the same thing that Donna did, is that when sending the kids to school, I'll take different routes that are not necessarily fast, but are interesting to the kids, or mix it up, or straighter, or something. It might be theme-based for certain drives. So it's kind of interesting that we kind of organically hit on that same thing, or maybe it's a thing with parents these days. Yeah, and then it becomes about like the kids' technology use and media use, because that's a whole other area of mediation where, you know, how much should kids be using it and when should they be unplugged from technology too, because that becomes a whole other issue. Have you dealt with that, Donna?
Yes, I was laughing. Yes, my daughter's 5, and you know what thing I noticed though, if she has paper and crayons and markers and paint, she won't even think about the technology. But once she has it, it's really hard to put it down. So my strategy has been to just hide it, because if she doesn't think about it, we don't have that conversation. But yeah, definitely.
And how is that gear when it comes to family life in Europe? Is that also kind of an issue when it comes to kind of technology and devices and trying to live a slower family life? Is that something also you see?
Yeah, but I think we have a different structure to working life, because we have shorter working hours, we have longer vacations, and I think we have very strict rules on overtime and all that, which I think is something that shows that we are very productive nations, but we are using less hours. So it is in a way an example, I think, that can be used all over the world in a way. So, and I think what we have probably some inheritance from all way back. I mean, the old Greek, for example, they had 2 time zones. They had chronological time, and they had what they called kairos, which was defined as the time in between. And you know, what is a life if it's only chronological? It's empty. And I think that's the structure that we have to think of, take responsibility for ourselves. Because if not, it's like we're living life that we're running and being afraid of coming late into our own funeral. And I think that is the essence of it. I mean, that we have a responsibility to help, and also, I mean, if you think about how we eat, that's a trend now in Europe, you know, to take more time when you eat and have that as like Kairos time, because that's like one of the most important thing in a day's life is the food you get and how you eat it. And if you don't have time for that, what do you have time for? So, you know, the question is busy doing what?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening here around the slow food movement, and I know Bill in his book New Slow City talked about that as well. So thanks a lot. This is a really great discussion, and I hope over the holidays we all get a little bit of time to really relax, get out in nature, and unplug a little bit from technology, and try to kind of slow things down and take that into our regular life. I want to thank our panel, Andrew Lee from American University, Donna Ballard at University of Texas, Geir Berthelsen at the World Institute of Slowness, Bill Powers, author of New Slow City, our producer Jefferson Yen. We also want to thank our sponsor, NextSpace and NextKids. You can learn more about their program at nextspace.us/nextkids. We hope everyone has a great weekend, and thanks for joining us. Take care, everyone.